When it comes to picking a favorite character, Star Wars fans can be odd. When Star Wars The Phantom Menace debuted, the consensus pick was Darth Maul, a Sith who spoke all of 11 words and had zero backstory. But, hey, he had a cool horn head and a double-sided lightsaber, and the younger demographic of sci-fi fans are easy to please. The same thing happened with the original trilogy and the bounty hunter, Boba Fett. We never learned anything about who he was until Star Wars Attack of the Clones. At least, he spoke little if at all, and his main job was to quietly hunt down Han Solo. When last we heard from him, he was cast aside unceremoniously into the Sarlacc pit, meeting an abrupt end despite deserving far more given his level of popularity. But now we'll get all the Boba Fett we can possibly handle, in the form of his own anthology film in the new Star Wars canon, due out in the next few years. Some may think his lack of character development in previous films will work against him, but we're of the opinion that this film could very well end up a home run for a number of reasons. 1. After all these years, he's still a fan favorite. Lando Calrissian and Boba Fett. Lucasfilm. Not every character from the original trilogy got a hastily fleshed-out backstory the way Boba did in Attack of the Clones, and that's by design. George Lucas knew he had to bring it all full circle somehow, and managed to do this by introducing Boba's father, Jango Fett. As we found out, Jango's DNA was used to create the Empire's clone army, with one unaltered clone set aside to be his son. The creepiness of raising a clone of yourself aside, that poor kid never had a shot at being normal, and we as fans deserve a chance to see that firsthand. 2. A new kind of story for the Star Wars universe. Boba Fett. Lucasfilm. For the most part, we understand why most Star Wars villains are the way they are. Even Grand Moff Tarkin has his own novel within the new canon, so it only seems right to take things a step further and explore the almost blank slate of Boba Fett's origins. When last we left Boba, he was holding the decapitated head of his father, following a showdown with Samuel L. Jedi Mace Windu if you want to be a stickler. So what happened next? This kid sees his father get his head chopped off by a Jedi Knight, and when we see him next he's the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy. There's absolutely a story there worth telling. The question now is when to pick it up. Will the story begin directly after Boba loses his father? Will we have some sort of space Batman story where Boba aimlessly roams the galaxy, gets trained by a group of space ninjas, and comes back as a terrifying space vigilante? We're not saying it'll happen, but don't tell us you wouldn't watch the hell out of that. 3. It contextualizes the rest of the Star Wars canon. Star Wars Rebels. Disney. So far, we've seen glimpses into the seedy underbelly of the Star Wars universe. Star Wars A New Hope showed us Mos Eisley, the hub for the galaxy's most notorious criminals. Jabba the Hutt gave us a crime boss that surely has a network that spans far past Tatooine. Even the rebellion started with a band of rogues trying to thwart governmental control. It only follows logically that a Boba Fett story could paint the full picture of the Star Wars underworld. While everyone plays politics on Coruscant, there's a whole criminal aspect we've never quite gotten to explore, and Boba would be the perfect doorway into that. 4. Simon Kinberg may be the film's head writer. Simon Kinberg. Kevin Wintergetty Images. You may not recognize the name immediately, but Simon Kinberg is the one person who's been tied to this project in the wake of director Josh Trank getting sacked by Disney. Kinberg's writing credits include X-Men Days of Future Past, The New Fantastic Four, and of course, Star Wars Rebels, the cartoon series tracking the early stages of the rebellion. Kinberg is already well-versed in writing for the new canon Star Wars world, so needless to say, he's the man for the job when it comes to bringing Boba Fett to life. Of course, it's worth noting that he also wrote X-Men The Last Stand, but it's safe to say we can blame most of that disaster on Brett Ratner. 5. Lucasfilm was one teaser away from announcing the movie back in 2015. Boba Fett. Lucasfilm first announced their anthology series back in 2015, at the annual Star Wars celebration, held in Anaheim, California. What we didn't know though, was that on the same day they unveiled plans for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, Disney was mere inches away from debuting the first footage from the aforementioned Josh Trank-old Boba Fett movie. According to Entertainment Weekly, it came so close to being officially announced, Lucasfilm even prepped a teaser reel to show at Star Wars Celebration in spring of 2015. Things fell apart in the 11th hour though, after an abrupt split with Trank shelved the project indefinitely. Instead, Rogue One found itself fast-tracked for a late 2016 release. In the months since, Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy was expectedly cagey about whether the Boba Fett anthology movie will get dusted off. There are possible movies that we have been talking a lot about, she mentioned to Entertainment Weekly, citing plans to sit down in January to discuss what's next. 6. Boba Fett has already been a major presence in Marvel's Star Wars comics. Boba Fett vs. Luke Skywalker. Marvel Comics. While the famed bounty hunter has been conspicuously absent from Disney's new Star Wars films, he's played a major role in Marvel's recent run of comics. In them, he's prominently featured throughout, even going up against Luke Skywalker in a story set directly after A New Hope, rather than the Fett that was killed by a blind man with a stick in Star Wars Return of the Jedi. We see him as the fully formed badass we know him to be, beating Luke handily in a head-to-head brawl. His role goes far beyond that though, with the comics revealing Boba Fett as the one who informs Darth Vader that Luke is in fact his son. That being said, there's plenty of material to pull from for an awesome bounty hunter-centric movie adaptation. 7. Pulling from the never-aired Underworld TV series Star Wars Underworld IGN. There's a good deal of material to be culled from the defunct Star Wars Underworld TV series, first developed way back before Lucasfilm was ever sold to Disney. The basic premise of the series was to give fans a peek into the seedy criminal underbelly of the Star Wars universe. Production got as far as having at least 100 or so scripts in hand, including one penned by Battlestar Galactica mastermind Ronald D. Moore. Producer Rick McCallum even went as far as to dub the series Deadwood in Space. Sadly, those scripts are currently collecting dust on a shelf somewhere in the Lucasfilm vaults. That doesn't mean there isn't plenty of good material to mine though, especially for Boba Fett. 8. Continuing to flesh out Boba Fett's backstory. Boba Fett on Star Wars The Clone Wars. Disney. Boba Fett's story in the prequels didn't simply come to a halt following the death of his father in Attack of the Clones. Rather, the Clone Wars animated series picked up where the film left off, showing us a young Boba accruing a reputation in the bounty hunting community. Eventually, he becomes the head of a gang of the galaxy's best hunters, even squaring off with Count Dooku himself as told in the Star Wars Dark Disciple novel set during the Clone Wars. It'd be interesting to see a film dive even deeper into the days before A New Hope. 9. Surviving the Sarlacc. Boba Fett. Lucasfilm. There's little doubting that Boba Fett deserved more than the death he suffered in Return of the Jedi, where a half-blind Han Solo accidentally knocked him into the Sarlacc pit. Thankfully, the Aftermath Life Debt novel published in 2016 features a chapter that hints at Fett actually surviving that encounter. We don't get much more beyond a subtle hint, but if he did end up climbing out of the Sarlacc, that leaves upwards of 30-some years post-Return of the Jedi unaccounted for in his timeline. 10. The next logical step in the Star Wars saga. Sabine and the Darksaber on Star Wars Rebels. Disney XD. The latest season of Star Wars Rebels has focused prominently on Mandalore, its role in the rebellion, and its long history of warriors born from that proud race of fighters. It'd be a natural next step for the anthology saga, especially with Rebels laying the considerable groundwork for a full and Mandalore-centric movie. That film could in turn focus on the Fett family, as well as Mandalore's own legacy, both before and after the rise of the Empire. Follow Nick on Twitter at Nick Northwest. Check out Entertainment Cheat Sheet on Facebook.